Welcome back to the Winter Growers Podcast. Today, my guests are Finegan and Jason Gold of Steelbow Farm in Austin, Texas. Now, a farm in Texas might seem like an unusual pick for the Winter Growers Podcast, but with climate change and more frequent extreme weather patterns, I was really curious to hear from a small farm at the 30th parallel. While farming from November through March is far more common at this latitude, it is, however, still full of challenges, including daily extreme temperature swings and a host of other issues. Finegan and Jason first farmed together in Austin before deciding to start their own farm in Maine, where they leased land for 3 seasons, selling mostly to Portland area restaurants and a CSA. After coming up short in their search for permanent farmland, they reached out to a former farm employer and mentor in Austin, who offered to lease them their land and farm facilities. It was too good of an opportunity, and they took the leap and moved their farm back down to Texas. So, in late fall 2019, they packed up their farm, had their first child, Izzy, and moved to Austin to begin their new farm adventure. In the last 2 years alone, and during a pandemic no less, they have rebuilt Steelbow Farm in very quick fashion, now cultivating 2.5 acres, selling specialty produce to over 20 restaurants, and managing a 135-member Veggie Box subscription service. They also have 7 employees, prioritize paying people well, all while striving to be ethical and kind employers with quality, community, and communication as a central focus in all that they do. Year-round growing is primary to their farming model, but it's not without its challenges, even in Texas. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope it offers a wider perspective on what it means to farm year-round, no matter where a farm is located. This episode is brought to you by Rimmel Greenhouses.
Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or your family's harvest, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment that you need for a harvest that you can count on. Rimmel Greenhouses are designed for durability and offer the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Visit rimmelgreenhouses.com to get a quote today.
Here at Four Season Farm, we use Rimmel greenhouse models to support our year-round crop production. Today's show is also brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud sponsor of the Winter Growers Podcast. Since 1973, Johnny's has supported farmers and gardeners with superior seeds, tools, and information to help ensure their growing success and feed their communities and families. The research farm is the heart of Johnny's, where they trial thousands of varieties and tools every year. The breeding program uniquely focuses on introducing varieties that meet the needs or solve challenges that mixed market, small farmers, and avid gardeners face. Visit johnnyseeds.com for innovative new varieties and time-tested favorites to grow this season. You can also browse the online Growers Library for a wealth of educational resources, including the Johnny's Winter Growing Guide, which features tips on planting and harvesting into the shortest days of the year. The employee owners at Johnny's look forward to growing with you. Now, back to the show. Welcome to the Winter Growers Podcast. Today, my guests are Finegan and Jason of Steelbow Farm in Austin, Texas. Welcome, Jason and Finegan.
Hi.
Great to have you here. Now, if everyone just heard, I actually said Texas, and that is correct. We're going way down south to the furthest that I've ever gone for a Winter Growers interview. And it might sound like a bit of a departure from most of the interviews, but I was really interested in speaking with both of you because you farm year-round, essentially, and you have a lot of challenges even growing in the winter months down there. So I'm really excited to sort of dig into some of the details of that and how, your experiences could be helpful to other farmers and listeners. So thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We're excited.
Well, great. Well, I usually like to start off with your farming story, how you met, how you got started farming, And, you know, just kind of give us like kind of the beginning and to kind of where you are now. And then we can dive into some more of the details of your story.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure.
I'll start at the beginning, I guess. So Jason and I actually both met because we were working on small veggie farms in and around Austin. So we both really learned to grow down here. Neither of us are from here. I'm originally, I'm a city kid through and through. I'm from San Francisco, California. Jason grew up like 60 miles north of New York City. So we both didn't come from a farming or agricultural background at all. But I think for me, Jason can speak for himself, but for me, I got into farming really just because of how much I love and value food. And that's something that I've always, in my family, you know, food was always very central. So I ended up finding myself, in Austin. I had bucked graduate school for the second time. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And I ended up volunteering on an urban farm in Austin, Boggy Creek Farm, which ended up being a very important place for me. But yeah, I started out volunteering. I ended up working for a while, and then I realized that I was hooked, and I tried to get a job on a farm kind of as quickly as possible after that, and landed at another farm, Tecolote, right outside of Austin, and that's kind of when and whereabouts I met Jason. You want to jump in a little bit too?
Yeah, just for quick context, that farm, Tecolote farm that Finegan was working on, is now the farm that we lease. So we'll come back around to that. But to make that connection, I was volunteering on another urban farm, a youth-oriented farm called Urban Roots at the time that we met. And my trajectory into farming started a little bit earlier than Finegan's and was not much different, and mostly for the same reasons. But yeah, and then one day we were having like a volunteer day at the farm that I was on, and Finegan was one of the volunteers, and that was the first time we met. And then just the farming community is not super big here, and the young farming community is smaller even, so we just kind of got to know each other through there. My roommate at the time also was working, or we met right before the season started, so my roommate was about to start working alongside Finegan at this farm, Tecolote farm, and then got to know each other.
Yeah.
And that's kind of
friends first, which was a great experience. And then, started dating. And it wasn't too long after we started dating that we really started thinking about starting our own farm. And at the time, it
was 2015, 2016.
Yeah. And at the time, it didn't seem super viable to do that here. And it didn't seem particularly intriguing for me to like return to California to start a small organic farm, just because, you know, cost of land and market saturation, et cetera. And Jason felt like similarly about New York in the Hudson Valley. So we really had no idea where we wanted to go. We took a season off of vegetables, and we ended up working on a livestock farm in the Adirondacks. And then we kind of just
that season though, the is a little more complicated than that. We bought an old Airstream and thought we were gonna like travel around and like check out some different areas, see what farming was like in some different parts of the country. And then we just ended up going to the Adirondacks and working for a full season, and basically deciding like at the end of that season, like, okay, we're done. We're going to start our own farm now.
Oh yeah. We kind of felt like we were ready to work for ourselves, I guess. And we actually,
what can I ask? What was like, what I always am so curious is like, because everyone's story is so different about the moment that they decide, okay, I'm ready. What did you really feel like was, defined your readiness?
For me, and I think I was definitely the more ready. It was a thing that we knew that we wanted to do, or thought that we knew that we wanted to do anyway. So it was sort of just a timing, like, when are we going to do it? Where are we going to do it? Sort of situation. And after that last season of working for other people, I just didn't ever want to work for anyone else again. I was like, I'm done.
That's relatable, understandable. Yep.
So I was like, maybe I will have to work for someone else again if this doesn't work out. But like, we know enough about what we're doing. And as we get into the finer details of how we started the farm, we started it with the lowest input,
and risk
possible. It was just like, how small can we start with as little money as possible? And if that works, cool, we'll keep trying and figure out how to make it work for real. And if not, then okay, we tried at least.
Yeah. And I think I felt ready as well. I will say that I think, in order to start your own farm business, or maybe any business of your own, you maybe still have to be pretty naive to get into it. So I still had that lovely naivete because I thought I was ready, and then in retrospect we weren't really ready at all. And since we've started this farm and this business, we've been constantly learning as we go and constantly really growing and changing. And so, it's always an evolution, and it's been always a process. So I don't know that we weren't necessarily ready, even though we felt ready.
And then you ended up in Maine. So I'm really curious how you landed in Maine.
Yeah.
So, chronologically, we finished out the season of the Adirondacks, ended up coming back to Texas for the winter because
it was home base.
It was just still our home base, yeah. So, and then we just got on the Maine Farmland Trust farm link. We had decided we wanted to go to Maine, I guess, for a couple of reasons. MAFCA and Maine Farmland Trust just seemed to us like there's nothing like that anywhere else. Like, the support networks and in Maine just were like, that's going to be so helpful. I also have I have a family, a summer place in Maine that my family's been going to, that my grandparents built in the 60s. So I have a strong connection to Maine. I have a bunch of friends there. I went to college in Vermont, so there were a bunch of Mainers there. And then also we thought land was a thing that we could totally afford in Maine.
Right. That was another huge thing, was price of land. And in Maine, it seemed at least feasible that we could potentially own our own land someday. Whereas at the time, Central Texas did not feel that way to us. And also I would say too, and it's funny because now we're back down here, but I would say also another huge, huge motivation for us was just thinking about, the changing climate and water. Learning to farm in Central Texas, water is hugely important, and water access is always a little bit frightening. So going up north where it seemed water was so abundant was another huge kind of draw for us at the time, I'd say.
And honestly, winter was really compelling because we had been farming year round down here for a few years, and we're like, oh God, yeah. If you farm in the north, you get to take winters off. And we didn't really think about what that meant when you are working for yourself and you aren't making any money all winter. But
well, you only get to take winter off if you're, I'll say, normal.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. That we didn't have all the information we needed about that one, but that was a part of our thought process.
Right. But yeah, Jason kind of got to this. So we did a little bit of a wild thing, which we ended up like striking up a correspondence with this landowner through Maine FarmLink, which Jason mentioned, and we actually we went back and forth a bunch. We talked on the phone a couple times,
only a few times,
and we just decided that we were gonna move up there. We had a Airstream trailer that we had renovated enough to live in, and we just like took that leap. We didn't even know really where we were going to be in Maine at the time.
I mean, aside from looking at Google Maps,
right.
We were like, oh, this is how you get to there.
Right. So it was a big leap. That's kind of been a theme with us, I guess, is like taking pretty big leaps. So that was a big one for sure. Yeah.
And so the FarmLink, I'm curious about the FarmLink program. Can you just quickly describe a little bit more how that works in Maine, just so people understand?
Totally. I think the FarmLink program has spread. I'm not sure where it began, but Maine has a really active FarmLink program, which is essentially that landowners and land seekers create profiles and explain a little bit about themselves, their intentions, what they want to do, and if it's the landowner, give prospective land users kind of the lay of the land, and it just is a way to connect want to be farmers or farmers with outland to landowners, with that resource. And that was that. I will say, like, there is a similar type of program down here, but it's much less utilized. So I will say that, like, the Maine FarmLink program, I think, is really wonderful for anyone looking to try and get onto some land.
Yeah, it's like a land dating site for farmers.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah, it's a great way to explore your options.
So where you took a leap and you ended up in what part of Maine?
In Norridgewock,
Norridgewock, Maine,
central Maine, little known, near Skowhegan, like 30 minutes from Waterville, an hour and a half from Portland, but really just right there in the middle.
And what did you have? Like, what was your leasing arrangement? Did you have any infrastructure? How did you create your farm initially?
Yeah, totally. It had kind of what, like, the bare minimum of what we thought we could get by with. So there was a field that's about 5 acres that, while we were in Texas, looked pretty good on the soil map. When we got there, it was still covered in snow, so we didn't really find out what it was like for a little while. But and then there was a building that had functioned as a garage, which we used basically still as a garage, but a place to store our stuff. And there had formerly been a house there, so there was utilities. So we had to do a little work to get the water and power back connected, but the framework for the infrastructure was there. So we knew we would have a place to keep our stuff, and we knew we would be able to irrigate and live there in our trailer. So that was sort of like, we thought, enough to do it.
So how did that first spring go for you?
It was interesting. We showed up to Maine probably about the middle of March, which we knew was a little bit later than we wanted to get there, but that's just sort of the circumstance. And then we tried to hit the ground running, but we didn't have any sort of real propagation space. The guy that we were renting the land from had like a little sort of enclosed greenhouse-ish sort of thing on the back of his house. But so we tried to start some stuff in there. It worked okay, but we pretty soon found Kennebec Valley Community College, which was only like 25 minutes away, and ended up leasing propagation space in their greenhouse, which we didn't even know was a thing until like a day after we got there. And we just happened to be in the same place at the same time as the farm manager. And I guess that's not that surprising because there's not that many people. But so that was a boon. If that hadn't been, we were like going to put up a propagation house, but the ground was frozen. We're like, oh, we didn't really think this through. But them having space to lease in their prop house was really what helped us get going the first year. And then we kept using that space. We never really built a propagation house for 3 seasons, or at least for like, earliest season stuff until we could start, we'd start stuff like in basically a caterpillar tunnel on the edge of the field when we no longer needed heat. But yeah.
So how did you design like your first season in terms of, did you start with, okay, these are the, restaurants or the people we want to sell to and we'll grow this? Or did you just start with, I'm just going to plant whatever we can and see what happens?
Well, I guess I would say that we're coming across as like completely unorganized, which we aren't the most organized people, but we did have like a somewhat thought through plan of this first season, which was that we were going to be exceptionally small. I think our first season we were like
just over half
an acre. We also were working off the farm during the main season that year. And we thought in Texas, the farmers market scene and the farmers market politics are very different. So our experience down here became pretty irrelevant, but we thought we would just get into a good farmers market. And then we got up to Maine and we realized how competitive farmers markets are to get into, and that no one generally is looking to let in a brand new vegetable grower into their farmers market. So we had to do some scrambling for sure. But we did have a lot of experience managing farms down here. Like we always have worked closely with chefs and restaurants. So like pretty immediately, I kind of started like looking at restaurants in Portland and figuring out who I thought was doing, using local food and who was doing interesting stuff. And just like tried to make contact, emailed, dropped off produce, did the whole kind of like game of trying to get a foot in the door. And pretty early on, we were able to connect to a few restaurants that took a little bit of a chance on us and ended up like really developing into very good and worthwhile relationships. So we ended up selling to restaurants in Portland, and then we did 2 farmers markets very close by that first season.
And so you ended up spending a total of 3 seasons in Maine, and I mean you definitely were successful because I heard about you as a farm, and I knew you were doing really wonderful work with restaurants in particular. So what was the motivation to pick up your farm and move to Texas?
This gets a little bit more complicated.
A lot of factors.
There were a lot of factors. So we were, like you said, so we grew a little bit each year, just in terms of, acreage. And we also, I think, grew in terms of, just a business, right? We started super small. There was kind of the only way we could grow was up. And then we got into the Skowhegan Farmers Market our second year. So we got into the Belgrade Lakes Farmers Market. We were doing 3 farmers markets. Sorry. And like you said, sales to restaurants. We were looking to buy land. We really wanted to stay in Maine. We had done the Journey Person program through MOFCA. which is an amazing resource that really helps with, beginning farmers, sets them up with a mentor, gives them professional development funds, and then also like farm business classes. So we had done all that. We had made great connections with other farmers. We were really ready to stay in Maine. And then I got pregnant. And
it's always part of the business plan, right?
Yeah. And so my parents live in Austin currently, thinking about future childcare and just how we were going to make that work. It seemed difficult without being close to family. And so I don't even know, just kind of on a wild whim, I ended up calling my former employer and kind of a mentor that we had stayed in touch with from a farm down here, and kind of just asking him like, hey, how wild, like how ridiculous would it be to farm, like just to farm in Texas right now, like to go back to Austin. And surprisingly, he told me, actually, he's kind of like, oh, actually, like, I think there's a huge gap in the specialty produce market. And I think that y'all would kill it down here. Like, maybe y'all should really think about that. And that was when? That was like probably in the spring of our final season up there. So what year would that have been? That was 2019. Yeah.
Also, our lease was ending on the land that we had been farming. The landowner wanted to do something else, and we were okay with that because we had kind of outgrown the space. And we just hadn't found anything that we wanted to buy. We looked at a lot of properties.
We wanted to be closer. We were doing at that point too, we had a CSA that most of our members were in Portland. We really wanted to be closer to Portland. Doing that like 3-hour round trip commute felt like it was getting pretty old. But just to continue, after I had that conversation with my former employer, a few weeks went by and he called me back out of the blue and told me that actually, because he was running their farm, Tecolote Farm, which was the like oldest organic CSA farm in Texas. They had, they did farmers markets, CSA, sold to restaurants. And he told me actually that they were going to transition away from farming, and kind of just was like, oh, and would y'all want to lease our farm? And that was very surprising. And also it seemed like a huge opportunity. So we actually like had to consider it.
And to give you a little context, the property that we farm is, if there's lots of traffic here, but if there's no traffic, you're in downtown Austin in 25 minutes. So
endless
market opportunities.
Exactly. Yeah. The thing is, Claire, which a reason why I think both of us really fell in love with Maine, is the farming community. There are so many amazing growers and producers, but also there are so many amazing growers and producers, and the population of the state is 1.5 million. Yeah. The population of Austin Metro is 1.5 million. Yeah. So yeah, maybe just Austin. It's growing so fast these days. But, so at a certain point, we kind of found ourselves in a situation where we didn't have land to grow on anymore. We didn't have any great prospects. And we also were thinking kind of about, how we were going to raise this new kiddo. And really like how we were going to be able to grow and scale the business so that it really would feel sustainable for us as a family. And we kind of just made the bet that in the short term, like Austin's market was going to be a pretty safe bet. So once again, we kind of took a big leap and we decided, to move back and move the farm back to Texas. So we moved back in January of 2020.
Right before the pandemic.
Yeah, with a three-week-old baby. And again, like hit the ground running. We had a whole plan. We were going to start pretty small here. And we wanted to sell to restaurants and do a couple farmers markets. We made our first deliveries in March to some restaurants. And it was literally like the week everything shut down. So we've quickly pivoted, which is, I think, the word for every small business since 2020. We quickly pivoted. We started up, we don't call it a CSA, we call it a veggie box program because it's not a traditional CSA at all. It's a lot more flexible. But yeah, we started that, and then we ended up doing that year like a lot. We did do good sales to restaurants that year. Places were still doing takeout. And then, as I'm sure you know, and many people experience, like the demand for local food from consumers was just wild in 2020. So it was not hard to find folks that wanted to subscribe for the veggie boxes. But I feel like I'm getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Maybe you can talk a little bit about like just where we're at now, what we have, the land base and all that.
Well, yeah. Do you want us to just keep going, or do you want to steer the ship a little better?
No. I am curious specifically about the land that you're on, and acreage, infrastructure, just all the details, how the leasing arrangement works, all of that.
So the land is, like I said, 20, 25 minutes outside of downtown Austin, heading east. And this part, we're like on the edge of what people call a blackland prairie. So it's actually really rich soils. If you head the other way outside of Austin, all you find is rocks. So there's pretty particular band of soil in this part of the state where most people are growing, and it's east of Austin. It is, the field that we lease is about 5 acres. We're cultivating probably about 4 of them now, and then we have a bunch of access drive lanes, and we were doing things in with sort of more tarping in mind in 50 by 100 blocks with driving lanes between them, but we quickly found that those were just areas of the farm that we weren't managing. So we're slowly getting rid of all those and opening up more acreage to growing space, and just trying to manage actual production spaces better than having more unproductive spaces to manage. It's a very heavy clay, super duper heavy clay. When it's wet, it is sticky and mucky and takes forever to dry out. And when it's dry, it is a rock. So,
and this is good soil for Austin?
It's good enough. There's actually a really nice band of kind of sandy stuff in the middle of the field, but it's not pervasive. But it's a give and take too, because we have a lot of, it's drier more often than it's wet here. So water retention is good. If we were farming on sand here, I don't know if we have enough water.
It'd be like a dust bowl. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. The sandy parts of the field we try to stay out of in the summer. Except for maybe for like melons, but the water holding and also then like nutrient holding capacity of the soils is really good. It's hard to work with, but once you found the sweet spot where you can get something in the ground, it grows nice vegetables. for sure.
So did you use a tractor to break land to create your beds? What's sort of your farming methods?
Initially, so when we moved down here, we did not own a tractor. We never owned a tractor in Maine. We have a BCS. We did have occasional use of a tractor in Maine, which we used to break ground there, but it was like really intermittent when it was available and we didn't have access to a lot of implements. So we basically didn't rely on it there. The folks who we lease from have a fairly large Kubota that I could use initially a little bit. And the land was in cultivation. It was cover cropped when we got here, which was nice. But they were growing in it up until like the previous fall. But yeah, when I got here, I used their tractor to break ground. And then mostly for the first year we were here, I just used the BCS to make beds, which is one thing when you're doing it on an acre and another thing when you're doing it on like 3.5 to 4 acres. So we upgraded to a 4-wheel tractor last spring, and have been piecing together the right equipment lineup since then, which is, I'm still trying to figure out exactly what the right equipment is to work with the soil all the time. But we were trying, in Maine, we tried to till as little as possible, and we were on sand, and it was easier to do there. We had a lot of weed pressure because it was a fallow field that we had turned over. But here, we just need to till sometimes, or else you can't physically get your hand in the soil. There's nothing to be done about it that we figured out yet. There's some methods, some no-till methods that we're trying that are working, but they're hard to do on 4 acres. We're doing a lot of deep compost mulch when we have the time to do it and planting into that rather than tilling. But we can't always put 2 inches of compost down when we want to plant something. So,
yeah, I mean, clay is tough. When I had my farm in Colorado, it was this red clay and it did the exact same thing. It turned into, these big clods that you could barely work. So, the method that I use, but I was still on a relatively small footprint, was I, brought in coarse sand and peat moss. And I, essentially added like 4 inches of sand onto the soil and tilled that in to create sort of a manufactured soil. But
totally. I actually looked into bringing in a bunch of sand, but the compost we buy is cheaper.
Yep.
So.
Yep. I know. I mean, it's crazy. And, if you don't do it quite right, you're going to create cement. So, it's a tricky balance.
Yeah. And we've also kind of always, in terms of how we would farm ideally on land that is ours. There's always been like a balancing act, right? Of like, we're on lease land. We also have never actually had any sort of long-term lease. So we felt very inhibited in terms of like what we can do and what we can invest. Jason didn't mention, we also, in this arrangement, the folks that own the land and that farmed here before, they still live on the property. We also lease their wash pack facility and then their 2 propagation greenhouses. And then I just totally lost my train of thought. So we don't live on the farm. We live in town. We commute every day with everyone else that works here as well. So it's a pretty atypical kind of farming arrangement. But I think it is really, for me, it was really lovely. This field, like this land, was my first paid farm job. So it is this kind of full circle return to kind of where it all started for me personally, which I think is pretty cool.
Hey, podcast listeners, we're going to pause for a moment to hear from one of our show sponsors. Today's episode of the Winter Growers Podcast is brought to you by Tunnel Vision Hoops. Tunnel Vision Hoops designs and manufactures do-it-yourself high tunnels, hoop houses, and greenhouses. With an extensive array of products to help large and small growers become more productive, they have 11 different tunnel widths to fit any application and designs to stand up to weather conditions from coast to coast. Tunnel Vision is also a national distributor of parts and accessories needed to build, maintain, or upgrade an existing tunnel or hoop house. Check out their Tunnel Vision Hoops YouTube channel for instructional how-to videos to help build a great high tunnel or hoop house. Here at Four Season Farm, we have 2 movable high tunnels made by Tunnel Vision Hoops, and they are definitely my favorites. To learn more, visit their website at tunnelvisionhoops.com. Today's show is also brought to you by Growing for Market magazine. Which crops will pay back your investment in a hoop house or greenhouse? How does managing a greenhouse through the winter differ from summer growing? And which crops can just be overwintered in the field? Learn all that and more by subscribing to Growing for Market magazine. The writers are farmers, not journalists. They won't tell you how to grow, they'll tell you how they grow, so you can decide what works for your farm. Growing for Market is celebrating 30 years of helping local food and flower growers succeed with articles written by experienced farmers from around North America. Since 1992, Growing for Market is by farmers, for farmers. Plus, subscriptions start at only $30 per year. Whether you do farmers markets, local wholesaling, a CSA, or dream of starting a farm, check them out today at growingformarket.com. Request a free sample print or digital copy from their website, and podcast listeners can get a new subscriber discount of 25% off with the code WINTER when subscribing at growingformarket.com. I think Growing for Market magazine is an excellent and affordable resource for any grower. Now, back to the show. So let's sort of switch gears into, the crops that you're growing and specifically what months, because you're in Texas and you're at the 30th parallel, I believe, and you never go below 10 hours of daylight per day.
Our shortest day is like 10 hours and 12 minutes.
Oh, there we go. Like so you lucked out.
Yeah.
So that means you have this, relatively mild climate for growing, November through March, I would say, which would be our winter up here in Maine. And I'm curious, though, how much infrastructure do you need, such as high tunnels, in order to grow successfully? And what does your crop profile look like during those months?
Yeah. So the thing about our climate is that, we don't ever go below 10 hours of daylight, but we can still get really cold. Not consistently, but our swings are dramatic, right? Like,
what's an example?
We just had a bad freeze over the weekend. So the whole week, all of last week, we're speaking now like the end of December, beginning of January. All of last week, the days were in the 80s and the nights were in the high 60s. And then Friday, we covered everything because the cold weather was coming in over the weekend. So we covered everything on Friday. Friday night, our low was 70 and our high was like 83 probably. And then Saturday night, our low got down to 26, and Sunday night, our low got down to 18.
Ooh, yikes.
And then Monday night, we were at about 26 again,
and
with 35 mile an hour winds.
Yeah.
When the cold front came in. So that's the real kicker. We can tolerate, we had a terrible winter storm last year, and we got down to a recorded 2 degrees out in the field, and we almost didn't lose anything. But we had cold weather leading up to it, and ice and snow, and row cover didn't blow off, and it stayed cold for a while, and things could handle it. But with the quick, from 80 to 26, we lost a lot of stuff that we would think could tolerate 26 degrees, but it's just the way that it came in. Nothing had a chance to harden off.
Yeah, we're learning more and more the little nuances of kind of that meteorological cocktail, if you will, right? It was this past weekend, it was super dry. We had, horrible winds, which despite our best attempts, row cover blew off. And yeah, in that last winter's freeze, which like probably maybe you heard about, was in a lot of ways like seemed worse, but we fared pretty well because we did have that freezing rain and then snow, and that was its own insulator for all those crops.
So then I'm curious about the infrastructure again. Like what percentage or what specific crops are you putting in those high tunnels or low tunnels?
Yes.
How much is out in the field? And do you feel like you can get away with, having so much in the field? Or would you like to expand high tunnel production?
Yes. So we currently only have one high tunnel. We have a small 30 by 48. It's a ledgewood that we were gifted while we were in Maine from some friends who didn't want it anymore. So I've put it down. I've taken it down, put it up, and taken it down and put it up a number of times now, and moved it all the way to Texas from Maine. But so that's our only high tunnel. Then we have 4 Farmer's Friend Caterpillar tunnels.
And it's not enough. We would
love to have more, and that's another complication of the lease arrangement. It's not we can't really access NRCS funding for high tunnels because we don't have a long-term lease, and the landowners don't love the idea of us having more covered structures in the field. So it's been sort of a push and pull, trying to get them to see our need for them. But also the prices on the Farmer's Friend stuff has really shot up with all the weirdness of buying things over the past 2 years, price of steel, supply chain issues and stuff. So we're not sure how we want to expand our covered growing spaces, but we would love to have a lot more. Because right now, that we have 4 Caterpillar tunnels, 1 pretty small high tunnel, and then I think we have about 2.5 acres out in the field right now.
Uncovered.
Well, partially
in
covered.
The process of covered.
Yeah. So then how do you break down the crops for what goes into those high tunnels? What's out in the field? What can you get away with?
So our high tunnel is sort of in a set pattern that we think is working, where for basically from March until our first frost, which this year, I guess technically we had a frost in November. Our historical first frost date is November 15th. Last year was December 1st. This year, I think we did get one around November 15th, but it was super light and didn't touch anything in tunnels. So cherry tomatoes in our high tunnel until, from when we plant at the beginning of March until they're dead. And that's 2 successions. We'll rip them out in the summer because they're unproductive over the summer here and replant. And then we just go to lettuce. And last year we got 1 crop of lettuce in the high tunnel. I think we might be able to squeeze 2 in this year because we flipped it over a little bit faster. And then we have 2 Gothic Caterpillar tunnels that we try not to move because it's a lot more work. And those were full of peppers all summer. And then as soon as the peppers were out, one's in lettuce, and one actually is full of broccolini, which was just sort of what are we going to put in this thing? Oh, we have all this broccolini. Let's throw it in there. And then we have 2, just Quonset tunnels, basic tunnels that we just move around a bunch. So whatever seems like worth protecting. Usually they're in lettuce or some sort of, they'll be planted like bok choy and tatsoi, or we move them on top of something that we want to grow a little bit faster because the plastic does really help with days to maturity this time of year, even though we're not, growth hasn't stopped. If we're in like a cooler period and we can keep the soil temperatures up, stuff does grow a lot faster. So right now, one of them it's got lettuce. We just moved it there last week over a lettuce succession. And then the other one has got a strange mix of 1 bed of lettuce that we're done with, and then some scallions and fennel and some leeks that we're growing as scallions, or lallions as we're calling them.
And then do you have mostly brassicas out in the fields? What is the breakdown? of the...
All real, like, yeah, cruciferous brassicas.
Yep.
They're all out in the field. And
generally
they're
our carrots,
fine.
Beets,
Yeah.
chicories are all in the field.
Mm-hmm.
Spinach. There's a lot out in the field right now.
Yeah, we still get if we put brassicas in a tunnel, we still get the same sorts of problems that people will get in cooler climates. We get bad aphids. We get bad aphids outside too, but if they're in a tunnel and it's a cold stretch and it's not open a lot, then it gets a lot worse.
How's that broccolini doing in the tunnel you mentioned? How's that going?
Well, it survived the weekend, so it's doing great compared to a lot of the broccolini in the field. But
is it fairly productive though? I'm just curious because I've toyed around with trying to do some here in Maine in a tunnel. The challenge for us always is, again, such reduced plant growth in the winter. You don't want to put something in the ground that isn't going to have a high return.
Totally.
And so, so I'm curious how it does.
It's been in there for probably 3 weeks now, so we won't know.
For another little bit of time. Yeah.
Yeah. But,
well, tell me how it goes, because I'm curious.
It was definitely a reactive move, because last winter we got a really bad freeze as our first frost and lost like our whole first succession of broccolini. So we didn't end up having any broccolini last winter until like probably February or March. And we were just like, not again. So we threw it in a tunnel just to see what would happen.
And what about those chicories? It sounds like you have a pretty good climate for doing those. Since there's so much of the rage now, I'm curious how that's going for you.
Yeah, we love chicories. So we grew them in Maine, and then coming down here, there's not a lot of other folks doing them. And so we really wanted to figure out like what we could get away with down here. There are definitely varieties that, obviously they're doing in like the Pacific Northwest, that it doesn't actually get cold enough, like sustained cold enough down here to do. But we do like Chioggia. We do like a nice Verona type. We got away with Puntarell this year. And then we always kind of have Frise and Escarole, in the mix as well. And
they like it outside most of the time. We didn't lose any chicories over this stretch. Some got beat up by the row cover because of the wind, but there's no sense. We don't feel any sense in putting them inside because they take so long to grow anyway, whether they're inside or out, that space just isn't really worth it.
And they can take a beating too. They can take a beating too, because you peel off those outer leaves and then you have this beautiful core.
Right. Exactly. You're like pulling them apart to reveal the core anyways. So, there's a lot more leeway there.
Yeah.
Than with like a head of lettuce or something. Right. Yeah.
So what would you say is your biggest moneymaker in the winter, or, the most dependable crop that you are growing?
Little gem lettuce.
Okay.
Is definitely our just biggest moneymaker, period. But definitely over the winter. We're planting lettuce, it seems constantly, because I guess it is constantly, from basically fall is tricky here because, we'll still be in the 90s until Halloween, maybe, and then we could have a frost 2 weeks later. So, it's hard to get stuff going early enough in the fall. So we try to get lettuce started and out in the field. And we did get away with a little bit this summer, in mid-August, but only really specific varieties can handle that. And then we really start seeing lettuce growing weather probably the middle of October through And then it depends on year by year. Last year we had a really mild spring and we were able to push lettuce until basically the beginning of June, but kind of once the summer heat comes in, which could be in May, could be in June, lettuce is really not happy about it. But yeah, in terms of just raw numbers, like grossing wise, Little Gems are the number one for us.
So in some of the pre-interview notes I have, you described yourselves as ethical and kind employers, which I think is fantastic. And you have 6 to 7 employees. What exactly does being an ethical, kind employer mean and look like to you?
So we, both Jason and I, worked on a lot of different farms before we started our own, and we actually didn't have any employees the first 2 years that we were farming for ourselves. We and then our third season we had our first 2 employees, and it was really like, one and a half. It was 1 full-time and 1 part-time person. And when we got down here, we haven't really talked much about like numbers and like financials, but our farm really shifted when we got down here. The demand feels pretty insatiable, especially from restaurants. And I guess we haven't really said this either, but really we are kind of a restaurant farm at heart. I'm sorry, I'm like veering a little bit, Clara, but I promise I will get back to your question. But I would say that, so the demand was just pretty insane, and we had to scale quickly to meet it, and that obviously meant that we had to grow in terms of people. And I think it was unique too, kind of starting our business again down here in 2020, in the first year of this ongoing pandemic. We got really close in many ways to the folks that worked here. We were our own little pod. We were like our own little, in those early days during like the first lockdown, we still luckily got to go to work every day. But the only people we were really seeing were each other. So we were each other's kind of support through this really intense time, and also became really close friends. But I think that was kind of a really interesting way to start our kind of employer experience down here, because it was so intense. But yeah, I guess really what we tried to do from the onset was just really be intentional about creating a work environment that was positive. We've worked in a lot of not so positive work environments, and we've worked for folks. Sometimes I think that the expectation that is placed on employees doesn't always feel fair or correct. So we really tried to like temper kind of our expectations and go into creating jobs for people that respected the fact that they have lives outside of the farm and honored that. So we really do try and keep our hours to what we say they are. That said, no one works on weekends. We don't have any crew working on weekends. Most people, like full time, pretty much is like a 4-day work week. We do have someone working 5 days because they want to. But really, we're just trying to create a space that is supportive, is fun, because we work hard, but we all really like the work we do, and trying to pay people decently. Also, honestly, there's this whole thing, right? Like no one's making any money farming, but we feel like we all should be making money farming. So we start everyone not dependent upon experience at $15 an hour. We have 3 women that are in more managerial roles, that we are getting to $20 an hour this year. And this year we're excited because for folks that have been here for a while, we're going to offer like paid sick leave or personal time off. Yeah, I don't know. That's starting to touch on some of the stuff we do. I mean, I think the biggest thing is that we really,
we want people to want to come to work.
Yeah.
Also, like, I mean, I feel like there's so much of what people learn working on farms is that, like, it's hard and stressful, but like, it doesn't have to be stressful because it's not your farm. Like, you're going to get paid at the end of the day. And we want people to want to be here, and we're offering year-round jobs. We don't want to be like, hiring 2 seasonal crews every year. So we're just trying to hang on to people too.
Yeah. I guess it's a little selfish as well, but I think also, like, we just, like Jason mentioned, stress, and I feel like that's one thing that we really are trying to be. We try to really not put any of our stress on to the people that work with us on the farm. And I think we generally do a pretty good job of that. It's a quality of life thing too. Like, I think, I don't know, through the farm evolving, but having a kid, having more employees, I think we've also kind of realized, like, the importance of boundaries in terms of like farming and work-life balance. And we're definitely not there yet, but we're really working towards it, and we're actively working towards it. And we do have some folks that are really invested, and we have conversations of, like, what does it look like to keep you here? Like, what does it look like if this can this be a career? We're really interested in trying to see if, like, we can make a farm where it's supporting people for, like, a good long while, and not just, a few seasons here and there. Because I think that is really lacking in the small farm kind of community, is like, there's farm workers and there's farm owners, and there's not always much between that. So that's something that I think we're really trying to consider and hopefully offer. But it's a conversation that we're still in the midst of with folks here.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I mean, good wages, intentionality, and boundaries. It's a good recipe as employers. And I think one of the challenges, especially with so many farms, especially rural farms, is your employees are typically living there on the property. And it's very difficult to sort of maintain very clear lines between work and personal time. So, interestingly, your situation, because you lease the land, you actually leave the land at the end of the day, and so do your employees. So I wonder how much that contributes to that boundary issue.
I think it's huge. And for us especially, because there's a forced end each day. And honestly, as we've been looking for land of our own in and around Austin, and that's something that we really are considering doing for a while longer. Like, even if we were to buy land, we are thinking that we still want to live in town, because it's been a nice division, and it has been a nice boundary, and it forces you to, like, you cannot work anymore once you're home. I mean, sure, like, we send emails, we do QuickBooks, like, we do administrative stuff, but there is something to be said for just not living on the farm. It can be a hassle too, for sure. It has its pros and cons, but I think that's a really good point that you, like, picked up on, because we're considering keeping that as our kind of norm, even if we or when we find land.
So yeah, what is next then for your business, for your family, for, what's next?
Well, so we are in the process of looking for farmland to buy. We have had to be pretty creative and flexible, I'd say, because the cost of land around Austin, and we are trying to stay around Austin, because, like I mentioned, we think want to continue to live in town, and also because all of our employees live in Austin. So we've talked with folks about kind of the radius and like how long people would be willing to commute. And we have about 45 minutes is the cap on that. So we're looking around Austin. Price per acre down here right now is absolutely wild. It's like prices, I mean, everywhere kind of post or in this pandemic have shot up, but we're talking like a good price right now is like maybe $30,000 an acre. So we've been trying to be creative about how we actually access land. I guess I don't know. I mean, do you want to kind of talk about where we're at, like in terms of like financials of the business or anything, or just in terms of what? No. Yes. Well.
Yeah, I mean, we're still not at the point where we want to be as a business, we think. I don't think we knew 2 years ago when we moved back down here what even the ballpark was. And I think we know what the ballpark is now to afford to farm here on like land that we own. But so we're still trying to grow to the point where we feel like, with what the price of land is, we can farm the way we want to and not just be stressed about all the debt service all the time. Because, having been, going into our 6th season and just leasing land is giving us a lot of flexibility to make other investments and also start paying ourselves pretty okay. Where if we had to spend like $1 million on a piece of property and then also build a farm on it, would really change the picture. So,
yeah. Well, I hope you are successful and lucky in finding that land, because that sounds like a huge hurdle. Yeah.
It is. Well, it is, but I think we're feeling pretty positive about it. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there's some avenues.
There's a couple things we're looking at,
exploring, and I think we're feeling like it's doable, which is pretty cool.
Well, good. Well, let's jump into the lightning round now. Are you ready for the questions that you selected?
Yeah.
So.
Okay, great. Well, first one is, what gets you up in the morning?
My answer would be Jason. Jason gets me up in the morning for sure. And then coffee.
Yeah, and then usually our child is what gets me up in the morning, more earlier than I'd like to most days.
So it goes your kid, Jason, and then you, Finegan.
Yes, yeah, I'm always the last one.
Well, our dog's the last one.
Yeah, that's true. Our dog's the last one to get. But I guess on a more like philosophical level, like what gets me up, I like what we do. Like, I mean, we were talking about making the farm a place where like employees want to work, but it's also like it's making the farm a place where we want to work too. And I really do love the work that we do. And I love the people that we get to do it with, and I have a lot of fun. So yeah, that's what gets me going. Once I've had my cup of coffee.
What is your favorite crop to grow, cook, and eat?
I think we'd say the same thing, which is chicories in general, or more specifically, radicchio, is our favorite for the winter months. In the summer, we're big pepper people, and there's a very strong division between what we can grow in the summer and what we can grow in the winter here. So we never have radicchio and peppers together.
That's good.
Or very, very rarely.
Yeah. Peppers have been, we were talking about winter, but peppers are huge. We do a ton of specialty peppers for restaurants in the summer. And that's just been really fun to nerd out about, different like specialty varieties and talk to chefs about what they want. And we're kind of like, you name it, we'll grow it. For pepper wise.
What's your favorite pepper variety?
Ooh.
Hot pepper or sweet pepper?
Oh yeah, hot pepper.
And any of them. What you got? What pops to mind first?
We maybe the answer might straddle the line, but we really like growing the habanadas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's
people
hard.
like buying the habanada,
right.
So
it's hard to separate like sometimes like what crops are like your favorite because they just like you can sell them for a really good price and like you can't grow enough. So that's like the habanada. I love poblanos. Those aren't like a sexy, exciting pepper particularly, but I love them. I love cooking with them myself. And yeah.
What's your favorite smell and least favorite smell on the farm?
I think my favorite smell is like cilantro either being harvested or mowed down, but just like when the farm smells like cilantro everywhere.
I think my favorite, I have two. I'm not always good with favorites. I love the smell of tulsi or holy basil.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also love the smell. This is very specific, but I I love the smell when like the walk-in is totally packed, but there's scallions in there. Like the scallion smell emanates so well. And it's like, I feel like you go in there, you're coming in and out of there right before lunch and it always makes me really hungry. So I love that smell too. Scallions in the walk-in.
And least favorite?
We both say rotting brassicas, which we've got a bunch of right now.
Yeah, we do have a bunch of. We have toasted dead rotting brassicas, and that's like it's like the most cliche answer, but it really is the worst smell.
Yeah. I think it's a tie between rotting onions, rotting potatoes, and rotting brassicas.
Yeah, rotting. And we said too, rotting peppers aren't great either.
Okay, anything rotting, then we'll just.
Turns out people don't like the smell of rotting things.
Okay, hardest part of farming.
I think for me, although I will say I'm getting better at it, but the hardest part about farming for me has just been learning kind of to deal with my perfectionism, which I don't even know that I didn't know that I was a perfectionist, I guess, until I started farming. And like, I would just take all the tiny constant failures so hard. And I still can't, but I'm really working on it. And I've made progress, but that to me, like, that's been really hard. I've had to really learn to kind of like let go a little bit of all the, of just kind of all the fails, because there are so many fails. And I've tried to reframe that to myself as opportunities to learn. And actually Jason, I have to say, has been so instrumental for me with that, because I think generally he already has that attitude. I think he's a lot more of like a farming optimist than I am. So it's been modeled well by Jason for me.
And what about you, Jason?
I think one of the things that's the hardest for me is that I just can't turn my brain off to it ever. There's no real hard stop to our season. We did actually take a vacation this summer, which was really nice, and I did like relax actually. But like when I'm lying in bed ready to go to sleep at night, like I'm like, oh, do we need more sprinklers or like just all the things? I can't get them out of my head. It'd be nice to do something else sometimes.
What's your favorite music that you listen to while farming?
Oh, well, we definitely have different answers to this. So we didn't really talk about this, but like we have pretty separate roles on the farm, and I'm much more like, I run like harvest processing days. But I would say that we as a crew, we're not very good at like putting someone's phone in and like putting Spotify on or anything. So we listen to, shout out to KUTX, which is the local NPR like music sister station. Lori Gallardo is always on her show when we're like processing in the afternoons. And we all love her and we love the music she plays. And I feel very happy. We have a great like local radio station that plays mostly pretty like good processing background music. So that's mine. Really, I'm kind of an NPR. I'm like maybe the total like stereotype, like organic farmer NPR lover. So, yeah.
And I'm like alone a lot with a piece of equipment. I feel like either sitting on the tractor or with the BCS or whatever. So I'll get fixated on things. Right now I'm listening to like Black Sabbath constantly as loud as possible with my headphones, like on the tractor with no one around me. And that keeps me going.
Does that turn your thinking brain off when you've got that music going?
Maybe. I don't
know. What is one piece of advice you wish you had starting out, or something you wish you had done differently?
I think we should have just gone for it a little bit more. The parameters that we entered into allowed us to start the farm in the first place, like starting super small and without a lot of capital. But seeing where we are now and where we want to eventually get to, I would have told myself just like dream a little bigger, like go for it. It's probably going to work out. And if it doesn't, then I don't know, but whatever. You get where you want to go faster. Also.
I think maybe this is similar to the hardest part of farming question, but for me too, just I guess realizing and learning, and this is maybe for anyone who has a small business, not just farming related, but just like, I don't know, like it's okay to like not know and to make mistakes and just kind of figure it out as you're going. Because we're all doing so much all the time. And I think for a while, I really felt like I had to know it all. And I had to like do it all best. And I really have learned to kind of like let go of that. And it feels great. And like the farm is like, the farm's doing better than we ever have. So,
better than we imagined.
Yeah, better than we imagined even. Which it feels really wonderful. And it, for me, it's like, it's been like in the letting go a little bit and like not lessening the standards, but I guess like the standards on myself. Cause I have always been my own worst critic, and I'm really hard on myself. So it's I would have told myself like, breathe more and be kinder to yourself and drink more water.
Stay hydrated. How do you relate to that which is out of your control?
we were both hoping you like didn't ask this question.
Well, I think we have kind of the same answer, which is like, I don't know, it's probably pretty stressful when it's happening, but once you can't do anything anymore, you can't do anything anymore. And you just kind of have to be at peace with that. And there's a farmer here who we both learned a lot from, who says, when shit doesn't go your way, that you might as well laugh as cry.
Yeah.
So, it's out of your control.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. 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 We also started, I think, like in 2020, when just everything was so up in the air and felt so tenuous all the time. Like we would just say to each other all the time, it is what it is. And I think that that's kind of stuck around too, of just like, yeah, you do what you can do. And then it is what it is.
Where and how does wildness enter or influence your farming practice?
Yeah. So I was thinking about this a little bit just in terms of kind of the larger evolution of Austin and Central Texas, and just the current development pressure that we're seeing here. And we don't own this land. We get to steward parts of it. But really, I've just been thinking a lot about how important it feels to conserve like farmland, rural land around here, because otherwise it's getting paved over and housing developments are going up. So just having some piece of farmland is allowing for an ecosystem that really is becoming, is having kind of nowhere else to go around here because the development pressure is so high. So yeah, it's like making space. It's making a little bit of space for wildlife, which kind of has, many cities are experiencing that, right? So just kind of preserving any wild space at all. The property that we lease the field on is 100 and some odd acres. So there is a lot of wildness around us. There's a lot of amazing, Texas has a really amazing, like birds and it's a migratory path for a ton of birds. And we have a birder that works here. So we're always learning about all the different birds that we get to see above us as we're farming. That's kind of my answer, I suppose.
And finally, how will you grow old farming?
I guess we're hoping that we won't. That either we'll have done a good enough job to retire or have cultivated the right sort of environment where we can have people with roles of responsibility and taking care of business, and we don't have to do a whole lot. But I don't think either of us is particularly trying to get really old and still grow vegetables.
I think, for me, I guess I was, I think about this question, and I love farming. We both, we do this because it was our passion, and we got to make it our job, which is a huge privilege, I think. But at the end of the day, it still is a job. And, we are saving for retirement because, I would love at some point to be able to explore some other passions that I have that I haven't because we've been farming, for the past 6 years. So yeah, I think that when I think about our future, we are thinking about retirement, and we're thinking about how we can maybe not get so old farming, and maybe do some other things after a career of farming.
I like that. I hope that can be a more common reality for farmers, especially young farmers, to think about. So,
yeah, me too.
Well, thank you both so much. This has been wonderful learning more about your story and all of the challenges that you're dealing with in Texas, of all places.
I feel like we didn't really talk that much about winter growing in Texas, but
that's okay. I mean, it's, it is what it is. And I wouldn't necessarily call it winter growing from, a traditional Maine perspective. It's a different type of year-round growing. And I think it's important and fascinating. So thank you for your time today to speak on that. And I wish you luck in all the covering work you're about to go do now on your farm. I hope it doesn't last too long.
Yeah. Thank you for having us. I just have to say, I love the podcast. I love listening to the episodes when I'm in the greenhouse seeding, and happy we could be on with you today and get to chat a bit. So thanks for creating this space for us and everyone to kind of nerd out and hear about other people's farms, because I love it.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Today's show was produced by me, Clara Coleman, with support from No-Till Growers. Special thank you to Willie Breeding for the theme music. Thank you to the patrons at patreon.com/no-till growers for helping to make this show possible.